I couldn't believe it all started with something so insignificant that it caused everything to come apart, Santiago yelled out from the hallway as I folded laundry in the living room. I was hoping you, Sophia, could lend me a hand. As I pivoted, I noticed him clumsily adjusting his belt near the staircase. His khaki shorts were falling to his hips, and his belt's leather strap was knotted in an ungainly knot. I need you to repair this. As he walked over to me, he inquired if it was stuck or something. I assured her it was fine and put the towels down. I drew forward, attempting to free the strap from its fastener. Do you still need help? I inquired, my mind focused. To ensure that I can keep providing you with captivating, genuine stories such as this one, please subscribe to my channel. If you want to see an exceptionally fascinating narrative, you should definitely watch this video all the way to the conclusion and give it a like. If you agree, please express your support by clicking the like button. Yeah. While I worked, he responded with a sorry, holding his breath. Upon my successful removal of the buckle, his shorts slid down to his ankles. There was no movement at all. I looked down more than I intended to before swiftly averting my gaze. With his cheeks flushed hot, Santiago stood motionless, his hands awkwardly hovering. He quickly pulled his shorts back up and mumbled an apology. I recoiled in shame. It's all right. This is inevitable. Yeah, I appreciate your assistance, he mumbled. He hurriedly made his way upstairs, abandoning me to my racing heart. Something changed between us after that accidental and somewhat embarrassing moment. Something had shifted, and I couldn't shake the electric charge in the air. Even though we never discussed it, our relationship changed drastically after that day. My union with Miguel was anything but idyllic. It was a peaceful, familiar routine that had gradually lost its luster, but it wasn't terrible either. We got married at the ages of 44 and 50, respectively, following the dissolution of our first marriages. Miguel kept himself occupied with regular golf games, fishing excursions, and work dinners, demonstrating his habitual nature. I kept myself occupied with gardening, volunteering, and housework. I had gotten used to the quiet that was between us. After that, Santiago entered. The boy Miguel had with his first marriage was reserved and kind. In the early years of my marriage, when he was still a college student, I only had the opportunity to see him on rare occasions during the mandatory holiday visits. As is common for young men when they first meet their stepmothers, he has always been reserved and uncomfortable. Even though I recalled him as a shy youngster, the man who came up at our door 6 years ago wasn't the same. Santiago, a recent college graduate, was still in the process of discovering his life's purpose. Even though Miguel didn't think much of his fine arts degree, he provided him a place to stay while he tried to figure out what was wrong. Despite the lack of agency, I was content. Miguel was at work or hanging out with friends. I was happy to have some company in our spacious home. I had no idea that Santiago would alter the power dynamic in the house the way he did. Santiago's magnetic charisma seemed to draw everyone to him. Her contagious grin and witty remarks brought life to the vacant rooms in the home, something Miguel failed to do. It all began with little things. I was in the middle of trimming hedges one morning when Santiago walked in barefoot and half drowsy with a cup of coffee. With a sluggish smile, he leaned against the door and watched me work. "You're up early," I said. As he took a drink of his coffee, he shrugged. "I stayed up all night. What with all the effort you're putting in out here, someone has to notice." The combination of laughing and shaking my head was enough to make me seem foolish. "Miguel overhears what you say. He assumes the garden tends to itself. Santiago claims that Miguel doesn't pay much attention," to which Miguel responded in a somewhat abrupt but sharp manner. Despite being taken aback by the statement, I chose not to confront him. As time went on, we were able to carry on more in-depth discussions and interactions became more natural. As I worked, Santiago would linger around in the kitchen, regaling me with tales from his college days and seeking my guidance on how to ace job applications. He was doodling in his notebook one day as he stretched out on the living room couch. "Is it okay if I look?" I gestured toward the pad and inquired. Before relinquishing it, he paused. Intricate pencil drawings, landscapes, portraits, and abstract patterns sprung to life on the pages. "These are absolutely incredible," I exclaimed, truly astounded. "Thank you," he whispered. "It's only something I do for fun. I advised you to present these to someone. The person in question is an art director and gallery owner." "Santiago, you're very talented." As our gazes met, he cracked a little smile. "To my knowledge, you are the first to say that." The weight of his words, which lingered between us, stirred me inwardly for the first time. Something edited me. Things started to fall apart after the belt incident. Over the course of many days, an atmosphere of unspoken tension pervaded our relationship. Attempts to avoid being alone with him were unsuccessful due to the house's size and relative quietness. Our paths kept crossing. I was doing the dishes one night when Santiago walked in with wet hair, fresh from a shower. "Sophia," he whispered. Hearing my name made my heart race, and I spun around. "Is that so?" Hesitantly, I inquired. "The other day, I apologized." He stuffed his hands into his pants pockets and expressed discomfort. My response was a hasty, "It's fine," and I hurried back to the sink. "It's best if we disregard it. I really doubt it." "Wait." He confessed without so much as a murmur. I went completely still. My chest tightened at the weight of his words. Words. As I faced him, a whirlwind of emotions swept through me. "My dear Santiago, we are unable to do this," I started, but I was unable to complete it. His stare fixed on her, he inched closer. "It was important to me, and I don't want you to believe otherwise." For an instant, none of us moved in response to the power of his words. Words. Miguel's voice abruptly broke Lance as it rang out from the entrance. I shouted out, "I'll be right there," as I cast my gaze away from Santiago. It was clear to me that something had changed the moment I stepped aside. The years that followed were characterized by evasion and secret admiration. As Santiago and I attempted to traverse the obstacle course we had laid, Miguel remained indifferent, engrossed in television or socializing with friends. Santiago showed up at the doorway one afternoon when I was folding clothes. His voice quivering, he sought whether we could converse. I shut the door after hesitating for a moment before nodding. Closing it behind him, he went inside. "When I am in your presence, I struggle to find the right words," he continued, his voice raspy. "We need to move on from this, Santiago." I spoke in a fearful tone, my face turning red. It lasted for a brief second. He said it wasn't a fleeting moment as he inched closer. The workload was overwhelming. It wasn't a fleeting moment for me either. I realized it immediately. Kissed by Santiago that night, it occurred without prior preparation. Afterwards, as I retreated, I warned him, this must not occur again. Both he and I could see he didn't believe it by the look in his eyes, even though he nodded. Whirlwinds of secret moments and subtle desperation characterized the days that followed the kiss. Despite Santiago and me feigning indifference, our tension was evident. What we didn't say weighed heavily on every gaze and unintentional contact. Miguel's mind wandered to his friends, his job, and his seemingly endless list of interests. But he remained blissfully unaware. Regardless of his level of distraction, the uneasy sensation that we were flirting with disaster persisted. The second occurrence took place in the garden. After I had spent the morning tending to the roses in the bright heat, Go appeared from behind me. Though his voice sliced through the silence, he assured her that she was never truly alone out here. "It's peaceful," I said, refusing to glance around. He moved in closer, enveloping me in his shadow. "Somehow, I get the impression that you prefer to stay away from me." I tried to keep my cool, even though my breath caught in my chest. "Are you saying that I have no idea what you mean?" He was persistent, making the request in a low voice. At this point, I didn't hesitate or think twice before turning to confront him. After he kissed me once more, I returned the gesture. What began as fleeting desires swiftly transformed into an irresistible power. We were cautious at first, seeking secluded areas of the property. We were afraid at first, but eventually gave in to the attraction and grew daring. Daring. Miguel was out having supper with clients. Santiago and I ended up at the library one night. With trembling hands, I pretended to reorganize the shelves while he stood behind me. "You're shaking," he said, his breath warm on my neck. Despite my voice betraying me, everything was all right. He then turned me to face him while placing his hands on my shoulders. "Fear is unnecessary." "I don't fear you. I said, my voice quivering. "The things we're doing make me nervous." Nervous. A dazed stare crossed his face as he held my face in his palms. Eventually, I stopped giving it any more mental attention. "Stay by my side." Disputes were on my mind. I tried to tell him that we couldn't go in this manner, but I just couldn't find the right words. I gave in and let him embrace me. I hadn't felt this lively in years. Years. The relationship's secret made it all the more intense. Every moment I managed to snag seemed like a defiance against the monotony of my established existence. This served as a reminder that despite the monotony of my marriage, there was still fire. On the other hand, anxiety accompanied the thrill. While Santiago and I were lounging on the living room couch one afternoon, Miguel showed up home earlier than planned. He yelled out to Sofia from the corridor. As Santiago dashed across the room, my pulse raced and I leapt to my feet. I tried to maintain a calm voice when I called in here. Miguel came in and glanced over our shoulders. He casually mentioned that he hadn't anticipated you having guests, but his gaze remained fixed on Santiago the whole time. "Are you experiencing a feeling of abandonment?" With a casual air, Santiago spoke. Miguel gave me a knowing nod before walking away, but the expression on his face sent shivers down my spine. The more cautious we were, the more obvious it became. Miguel started to probe with light inquiries that grew increasingly pointed as time went on. Santiago commented as we were eating supper one night that you two appear to be getting along swimmingly. Miguel smiled artificially, acknowledging his helpfulness around the house. Miguel gave an unreadable nod. "That's wonderful to see. It's comforting to know that you have someone to talk to while I'm busy." A chill ran down my spine as I felt the blood drain from my face due to the unsettling undertone in his comments. Ricardo, Santiago's best buddy, stepped up uninvited, and that was the first straw. Straw was a fiery, outspoken individual with an uncanny knack for discovering secrets. Ricardo complained to Santiago one day, his voice soft but direct, that Santiago had been spending too much time at home. According to Santiago, he was only assisting. "Be nice," Ricardo said, his eyes crossing across to meet mine. "It was nice to have a companion to share your time with." I felt a shiver go down my spine at the remarks and promptly left the two of them alone. Alone. Go discover me in the kitchen at a later time, looking anxious. Quietly, he mentioned that Ricardo is aware of something. "I'm guessing," I said, my voice quivering. With a shake of his head, Santiago expressed his disapproval. "Intelligence. Miguel will find a way to make it work." Tensions in the house rose to intolerable levels as the weeks passed. It seemed as if a tempest were brewing, what with Miguel's suspicions, Ricardo's remarks, and the burden of our secret. My affections for Santiago intensified in tandem with the dangers, and I just couldn't bear to part with him, no matter how dire the situation became. Breathing underwater is akin to maintaining a secret. There is a limit to how much longer you can keep going before you give in. We were both adept at hiding, but Santiago's and my insecurities were starting to show. Both Shoo and Miguel were visible. Then there was Miguel's coworker Clara, who somehow elevated her once casual visits to the level of an invasion. Uninvited but completely at ease, Clara showed up one Saturday afternoon. She had made many visits to the residence in the past, each time claiming to be Miguel's delivery person. An excessively cheery disposition and a bottle of wine were her accompanying items this time. "I was going to swing by." This is what she said when she entered the kitchen and saw me dicing veggies. "I'm fine," I said, putting on an apparent smile. With her eyes darting about the room as if taking notes, Clara set the bottle on the counter and leaned against the island. The pot is breathtaking. What an excellent job you've done making it seem like a house. I expressed my gratitude, my voice strained. She couldn't take her eyes off the rear door, from whence Santiago had emerged minutes ago. Both you and Santiago are fortunate to have Miguel as a friend. Isn't he a huge assistance around here? I managed to maintain a composed demeanor despite my racing heart. He has been fantastic. We appreciate his presence. A smile that didn't quite reach Clara's eyes curled up her lips. Lips to be. Clara started popping up at the house more often as the weeks passed. I could tell her real goal was to collect information, but she constantly made up reasons to stop by, saying it was for work. Work. I couldn't determine if she was referring to Santiago or Miguel. She made the comment as we were relaxing in the living room one day. Despite Miguel's reluctance to discuss his personal life, it seems that your relationship hasn't always been easy. Sailing. I clenched around the teacup in my lap as I tensed up. Every marriage has its challenges, I responded, making an effort to maintain my composure. I'm sure it helps to have Santiago around, but Clara's grin seemed overly lovely to be real. A real meaner's rather alert. I started to feel a sense of dread as I realized the obvious implications. Ricardo came next. The remarks of Santiago's closest buddy, who was previously there, were now much more incisive. As Ricardo and Santiago sipped their beers on the terrace one evening, he casually said that you've been spending quite a bit of time with Sofia. With a nonchalant shrug, Santiago maintained his tone. Tone PM Mom is her name. We will definitely have a conversation. Indeed, but that's not all, is it? Ricardo was really aggressive, staring intently. Santiago gripped his bottle tightly. Can you explain yourself? Ricardo asserts, I'm stating you're behaving strangely, and it has nothing to do with work concerns. I believe she is involved in something else that is happening. He got up from his chair, which was rubbing against the stone all of a sudden. Your knowledge is lacking, Ricardo said with a pinched brow. Am I not? The growing tension within the house became intolerable. She's relationship with Miguel was always precarious. Every time Clara came to visit, it felt like a test that I would inevitably fail. Even Santiago, who was getting increasingly irritated by our concealment, was acting more brazenly. One night, as we were reading at the library, he looked at me with a serious face. I can't keep doing this, he remarked. We need to exercise caution, Santiago, I said, my voice quivering. Being cautious isn't sufficient, he retorted. Ricardo is vigilant, Clara is conducting an investigation, and Miguel's naivety may be underestimated, asked Gink. I turned my gaze and tears welled up in my eyes. Eyes, I'm familiar. Are you recommending a halt? With a lowering of his voice, Santiago drew nearer. You are aware that I am incapable of doing that, but we must choose our next steps, since this cannot be sustained indefinitely. The dinner party that Miguel was adamant about throwing was the tipping moment. Miguel's coworkers, including Clara, were present. Ricardo also showed up, having received an invitation from Santiago. Everything began so simply that evening. The atmosphere was filled with the sound of clinking wine glasses, laughter, and courteous conversation. However, the vibe changed as the night progressed. So, Sophia, Clara said, her voice rising over the din, when Miguel isn't around, what do you do to pass the time? I went completely still. Insinuation was dripping from her inquiry. As usual, I responded, trying to maintain my composure. She spent her time tending to the garden, reading, and occasionally helping Santiago. An edge to Clara's grin became more defined. So, you're probably quite close. From across the table, Santiago caught Ricardo's attention as he arched an eyebrow. Yes, Santiago has been here quite a bit recently. I suppose it clarifies things. Things is a pleasant conversationalist. A hush descended over the table. With an unintelligible face, Miguel glanced between us. Clara savored her wine, her expression exuding pure contentment. All of a sudden, Santiago got to his feet. He mumbled something and then left the room. Worried, I decided to check on him. After getting to my feet, I noticed Santiago pacing in the yard, lit only by the gentle light of the patio lights. He told me it was a mistake as I drew near. "What was that?" I said, my pulse pounding. He spoke it all in a tense voice. He remained silent, allowing Ricardo to enter, as if nothing was amiss. "It has collapsed. This is not Sophia." I reached out to touch his arm. "I'm sure we can solve it." His expression was one of desperation as he met my gaze. Just how? The strategies I've been using to keep things together are beginning to leak. We both came to a complete standstill as soon as we heard footfall on the gravel. Warm light framed Miguel's figure at the edge of the garden. "Tell me what's happening outside," he said in a low, menacing voice. The final confrontation was about to unfold, revealing all our long-kept secrets. Nervously at the garden's edge, Miguel observed us with an expressionless face. For what seemed like an endless amount of time, there was complete quiet. Without knowing what to do next, Santiago and I stood still. He was crushing me with his intense stare. "What's happening out here?" Miguel said again, his voice low and menacing. Nothing came out of my lips, even though I opened them. I could see the terror in Santiago's eyes as we shared a quick glance. I tried to maintain a calm voice and fake a grin as I explained that we were simply having a conversation. Everything is fine. Unable to interpret our expressions, Miguel's gaze darted from one of us to the other. Saying this with a suspicious undertone, he made a pointed remark about how you two appeared to have so much in common. Santiago stood up straight, his jaw tightened. "Miguel, is something wrong?" With an icy grin on his face, Miguel stepped forward. "I am uncertain. Is it necessary?" There was a growing sense of tension between us, as if the air were becoming more dense, thicker. The sensation of my heart racing tightened my chest. Miguel had progressed beyond mere speculation. It was obvious to him. At last he had figured it out. After a little pause, Santiago nodded and turned to go. "I'll go inside," he said with a tight, tense voice. Gil said in a deep voice. "This is where you'll remain." Without taking a step, Santiago froze. He redirected his focus to me, maintaining an icy stare. "Would you mind elaborating on the reason my kid and wife are discreetly exploring the lawn while our guests are having dinner?" No matter how much I tried, I couldn't get the words out. My body froze. Then I froze again. The weight of the moment was pressing down on me once again. Miguel's voice once again broke the stillness, confirming his suspicions. Miguel was even more distant from me the next day. Heide's strained voice and cold expressions indicated that he was determined not to let this matter rest. Even though Santiago attempted to maintain his distance, things appeared to be getting worse. It seemed inevitable that Clara would find a way to become involved in the mayhem. Mayhem I cite, I couldn't help but notice how weird it was. Clara, as she sipped her morning coffee in the kitchen, expressed a pretended worry. Maintaining an air of casualness, I stated that it was only a misunderstanding. Lady Clara's grin was too sugary as she cocked her head. "However, Sophia, use caution. In this particular scenario, one's perceptions can be quite harmful." In my belly sank. Her warnings had more than that. They posed a danger. Her expression of contentment filled me with chills. Miguel called me to the study later that night. Although his silence had an unsettling quality, his expression remained composed. Quality. During this, as Miguel relaxed in his seat, he spoke. "Perhaps we should make some adjustments now. Are there any changes?" My heart was sinking as I inquired with caution. In a nonchalant tone, Miguel stated that Santiago had been here for long enough. He ought to find his own place and move on, in my opinion. It took me by surprise. Miguel still doesn't understand everything. Allow him some time. With a forceful voice, Miguel interrupted, saying that he can find the solution elsewhere. There can be no doubt about this. As Miguel's determination to have Santiago depart became more apparent, the tension escalated. The tension in the impending encounter eventually broke. broke. The response was absolutely tremendous when I informed Santiago. "He's evicting me," Santiago said, his voice quivering with shock. "Why is he evicting me? Was there a conversation taking place outside in the yard?" In an effort to reassure him, I stated that he seems suspicious. Santiago shakes his head, expressing his disapproval. "G is happening," he thinks. "That's not the case. His issue, not ours, is that. He attempted to stabilize him by reaching for his arm. This was a recognized danger. This cannot go on in its current downward spiral. Spiral infuriated Santiago. That's not why he's acting suspiciously. He's attempting to exert power over you by doing this. I certainly will not let him." The night Miguel told Santiago to depart, everything changed. Miguel felt a shiver run down his spine as he delivered a stern ultimatum. Miguel stated quietly over dinner that you had 1 week to gather your belongings. Without warning, Santiago sprang up and banged his fork into his tray. He snapped, "As soon as I go, you have no say in the matter." "This is my house," Miguel said with an unpleasant tone. "This is something I will not stand for anymore." Anger erupted in Santiago. Who is being asked to tolerate what? Should I be present here? Alternatively, I could become closer to Sofia than you could ever hope to. A hush descended over the room. The intensity of Miguel's look made my blood chill and my face flush with fear. His voice had grown low and menacing as he slowly rose to his feet. "I make you regret staying here. You should go immediately." I discovered Santiago that night in his room, making preparations to go. We were both still fuming with rage. Santiago, his voice strained with annoyance, admonished you not to allow him to triumph. "This isn't about winning," I whispered. "Surviving is the main focus here." The tension in Santiago's gaze was palpable. Staying here is not mandatory. Staying with him is not mandatory. In a barely audible voice, I said, "I don't have a choice," tears silently forming in my eyes. According to Santiago, who drew nearer to me, there is always an option. Tag along. I pondered the words for a while as they lingered in the atmosphere. I was struck by the idea of uprooting one's life and starting anew in a distant land. However, the implications of that decision rapidly became apparent to me. Whom? Attempting to disagree, I simply shook my head. "Not possible," I said, my voice quivering. Santiago nodded, but his expression softened. "I'll go," he whispered. But that's not all. By dawn the following day, Santiago had vanished. I spent the day bewildered by the haunting stillness as I wandered the empty house, disturbed by Miguel's silence. The true shock, though, came later that night, when I discovered a message tucked beneath my bedroom door. "Miguel, you are ignorant of the reality, yet you believe you have triumphed. Yes, I promise you will. My name is Clara." Though I read the message, my hands trembled. Knowing was Clara's forte. She was now making good use of everything she had seen or overheard. Holding the message in my hands was like holding a ticking time bomb. I froze while I read it many times, the words becoming hazy with each reading. I approached Clara the next day. With a weak and quavering voice, I cornered her in the kitchen and held out the note. "Tell me what I'm looking at." It was my demand. Clara remained unfazed. With a mischievous grin teasing her lips, she rested her weight against the countertop. She remained faithful to its original meaning. The truth should be revealed to Miguel. "Isn't that so?" I hastily stated, with a hint of hesitation in my voice that there is nothing to disclose. With an arched eyebrow and a look of hypocritical empathy, Clara looked away. "Are you kidding me, Sofia? You can't possibly believe it." "I've witnessed the gazes shared between Santiago and you. I am not deaf." I drew nearer, my voice quivering, as my heart tightened. "This manipulation will not affect me in any way. Your actions won't destroy your family." Clara shook her head and giggled gently. "Kill off your loved ones, Sofia? Indeed. Your execution is impeccable. All I'm doing is speeding up the process." From farther down the corridor came Miguel's voice before I could answer. Clara's grin spread. "It's okay," she whispered. "I will handle the scheduling." While picking at his supper that night, Miguel was much more reserved than normal, his demeanor clearly agitated. Even though Clara had departed hours before, her shadow continued to loom over everything. Miguel and I were choked by the eerie quiet. With a last look at me, Miguel set down his fork. "Would you like to tell me something, Sophia?" His gaze sharpened as he inquired. My heart raced as I went into a frozen state. Smirks were something I worked hard to suppress. "Tell me what you mean." Miguel cocked his head in his chair and studied me intently. "Your behavior has been peculiar lately. Then there's Clara, who keeps hinting at things I don't get. This is the moment to inform me if anything is happening. Keeping my cool was a challenge." "Miguel, I don't see anything happening. It seems like Clara is intent on causing problems. You are aware of her conduct." After giving me a lengthy look, Miguel finally nodded slowly. Speaking with a tone that betrayed caution, he expressed his hope that you were correct. "What if I turned out to be wrong?" He stopped short of completing the phrase. But I understood. The tension was rising. I was so restless that night that I stayed in bed all day. The options were racing through my head. I felt the weight of Clara's warning. Additionally, Miguel's increasing mistrust seemed explosive. My phone rang on the nightstand as I was about to nod off. My heart pounded as I read the message, prompting me to grab it. "On Monday at noon, I will meet you at the park beside the bridge. I am Santiago." The following day, I pretended to run errands and left the house. I found Santiago waiting by the bridge when I got to the park. He had his hands in his jacket pockets. I murmured, my voice quivering, "You shouldn't have contacted me," as I drew near. He stated that I was unable to move forward. Anger reflected in his gaze. Clara visited me. "Excuse me?" With each breath, my heart sank farther. "Is she aware?" Santiago took a bow. "Sophia is utilizing her extensive knowledge to reach Miguel." I felt queasy. "Tell me what she said to you." "She wants me to confess," he remarked with a sour tone. "Her wish is that I inform Miguel of the reality. Sophia, she's playing us both." The burden of it all was too much to bear, so I shut my eyes. I whispered to myself that time was crucial. Santiago's hold on my hand grounded my spirit. In that case, we need to take action prior to her.